The heavy oak doors of Evelyn Hayes' study loomed ahead, a silent testament to her authority. Charlie Hayes hesitated at the threshold, her manicured nails digging into the velvet fabric of her designer jacket. Her mother never called her to the study without a reason, and reasons with Evelyn Hayes were rarely pleasant. "Charlotte," came Evelyn's voice, sharp and commanding. Charlie squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The room exuded wealth, with its mahogany-paneled walls, leather-bound volumes, and an antique globe that doubled as a bar. Evelyn sat behind an imposing desk, her icy blue eyes sharp against the golden light of a crystal chandelier. She was impeccably dressed, her tailored suit a reflection of her calculated persona. "You wanted to see me?" Charlie asked, her tone edged with defiance. Evelyn gestured to the chair opposite her. "Sit." "I'd rather stand," Charlie replied, crossing her arms. Evelyn's lips thinned, but she didn't press the issue. "Very well. Let's get to the point. Your reckless behavior has tarnished this family's name for the last time." Charlie raised an eyebrow. "Oh, here we go. What is it this time? The party in Montauk? The tabloid photos? Or is it because I wore jeans to brunch?" "This is not a joke, Charlotte," Evelyn snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. "Your father left me the responsibility of safeguarding this family's legacy, and I won't let you squander it with your antics." Charlie's sarcasm faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn leaned back, her hands steepled. "I've decided it's time for you to settle down. You'll marry Luke Carter." The name hung in the air, absurd and shocking. "The driver?" Charlie's voice rose, disbelief etched across her face. "You're kidding." "I never joke about matters of importance," Evelyn replied coldly. "You'll marry him, or you'll lose access to your trust fund, permanently." Charlie laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You've lost your mind if you think I'm agreeing to this circus." Evelyn reached for an envelope on her desk, sliding it toward Charlie. "You'll want to reconsider." "Oh, what's this?" Charlie asked, her fingers hesitating over the envelope. "Something that could ruin you," Evelyn said cryptically. "Open it or don't. Either way, you have a week to decide. If you refuse, you'll be out of this house, out of this life, and left with nothing." Charlie's pulse quickened as she stared at the envelope, her mind racing. "Why him?" she demanded. "What could possibly make you think I'd marry the driver?" Evelyn's lips curled into a faint smile. "Because Luke Carter is exactly what this family needs right now. A man with discipline, humility, and a clean image to offset your reputation." The room fell silent, the weight of Evelyn's words pressing down on Charlie like an invisible hand. "I won't do it," Charlie said, her voice shaking but resolute. "Then you'll face the consequences," Evelyn replied, her voice a cold whisper. "And believe me, Charlotte, you won't like them." That night, as Charlie lay awake in her gilded bedroom, if the envelope sat unopened on her bedside table, she could hear Evelyn's voice through the thin walls, her mother speaking in hushed tones on the phone. "Make sure everything is ready," Evelyn said. "She'll have no choice." The words chilled Charlie to her core. She reached for the envelope, her hands trembling as she slid it open. The contents would change her life forever, setting her on a path of defiance, discovery, and a battle for the truth. The morning sunlight filtered through the massive windows of the Hayes estate, casting long golden rays across the marble floors. Charlie stormed down the grand staircase, her auburn hair disheveled and her emerald eyes flashing with fury. She had spent the entire night agonizing over Evelyn's ultimatum and the mysterious envelope that now sat like a ticking time bomb in her desk drawer. But one thing was clear. If Evelyn thought she could manipulate her into a sham marriage, she was sorely mistaken. "Where is he?" Charlie demanded, her voice echoing in the cavernous foyer. Anna, the ever-composed housekeeper, flinched at the sharpness in her tone. "Mr. Carter is in the garage, Miss Charlotte." Charlie barely acknowledged her as she marched through the estate, her designer heels clicking against the polished floors. By the time she reached the garage, her frustration had reached a boiling point. She shoved the heavy door open, revealing a large, pristine space filled with luxury cars gleaming under fluorescent lights. At the far end, Luke Carter stood by a sleek black SUV, wiping the hood with a rag. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his tanned skin and rugged features the result of years of hard labor, and, as Charlie would soon learn, something far more intense. He didn't look up as she approached, his movements methodical and calm. "Luke!" Charlie called, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the garage. He straightened slowly, turning to face her. His piercing blue eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "Miss Hayes," he said, his tone polite but distant. "Drop the act," Charlie snapped, crossing her arms. "Did my mother put you up to this?" Luke raised an eyebrow. "Put me up to what?" "This marriage," she spat, her voice rising. "She thinks she can force me to marry you, like this is the Middle Ages. And you, what's your angle? Money? A ticket out of this garage?" Luke's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened slightly. "I don't have an angle," he said evenly. "Your mother made me an offer, and I accepted." Charlie let out a disbelieving laugh. "Unbelievable. So what? You're just going to play along? Pretend this is some fairy tale where the poor driver gets to marry the spoiled princess?" Luke's gaze didn't waver. "You think I want this?" he asked, his voice low and measured. "I have no interest in marrying someone who thinks they're better than everyone else." Charlie froze, his words cutting deeper than she expected. "Then why are you doing it?" she demanded, her voice softer now, tinged with genuine curiosity. For the first time, Luke hesitated. He glanced away, his hand tightening around the rag in his hand. "It's personal," he said finally. "But let's get one thing straight. I'm not doing this for you, and I'm sure as hell not doing it for your mother. So, if you want to keep throwing a tantrum, go ahead. It won't change anything." Before Charlie could respond, he turned back to the car, dismissing her with his silence. The humiliation stung, but more than that, she felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. Curiosity, perhaps, or grudging respect. Later that evening, the garage was quiet, save for the faint rustle of the breeze through the open doors. Luke sat on a bench, rolling up his sleeves to reveal faint scars and tattoos etched into his forearms. A faded photo rested on the workbench beside him, a picture of a young girl with bright eyes and a mischievous grin. "Ah, Mia," he murmured, tracing a finger over the photo. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. The screen lit up with a message. "Foreclosure notice. Need payment by the 15th. Luke sighed heavily, his shoulders sagging under the weight of it all. Mia, his younger sister, had been his responsibility since their parents' deaths, over a decade ago. Her cerebral palsy required constant care, and the medical bills had drained every ounce of his savings. Evelyn's offer, a deal with the devil as he saw it, was the only way to keep a roof over their heads and ensure Mia's care. "Just 1 year," he told himself. "I can survive anything for 1 year." The next morning, Charlie sat at the grand dining table, poking at her breakfast with little interest. Across from her, Evelyn read the newspaper, perfectly composed as always. "I spoke to Luke," Charlie said abruptly, breaking the silence. Evelyn didn't look up. "And?" And he's as thrilled about this as I am, Charlie said bitterly. Which is to say, not at all. Evelyn set down the paper, her gaze sharp. Luke understands his role. You, on the other hand, need to stop behaving like a child. This is happening, Charlotte, whether you like it or not. Why him? Charlie demanded. Out of all the eligible men in the world, why did you choose our driver? Evelyn's expression didn't falter. Because he's dependable, disciplined, and unencumbered by the distractions of wealth. He's exactly the kind of influence you need. Charlie pushed her plate aside, her appetite gone. You're unbelievable, she said, rising from the table. As she stormed out of the room, Evelyn's voice followed her. You have 5 days left to decide, Charlotte. Choose wisely. That night, as Luke locked up the garage, his phone buzzed with another message. This time, the sender was unknown. You're in deeper than you think. Watch your back. Luke frowned, a sense of unease settling over him. He glanced around the quiet estate, the shadows stretching long and dark under the pale moonlight. He didn't know who had sent the message, but he knew one thing for sure. This marriage was far more complicated than he'd realized. The Hamptons were abuzz with whispers about the upcoming nuptials between Charlotte Hayes, the notorious socialite, and Luke Carter, the family's enigmatic driver. Invitations had been sent to New York's most elite circles, but the nature of the union left the guests with more questions than excitement. Was this Evelyn Hayes' attempt to create a headline-grabbing spectacle? Or was there something more sinister beneath the surface? The day of the wedding arrived with all the grandeur one would expect of the Hayes family. The estate was transformed into a lavish venue, adorned with white roses and crystal chandeliers that sparkled in the sunlight. Journalists stationed outside the gates clamored for details, their cameras snapping frantically every time a luxury car pulled up. Inside the grand hall, however, tension simmered. Evelyn Hayes sat poised in the front row, her icy blue eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. To her, this wasn't just a wedding, it was a display of her control. The guests murmured as the clock ticked past the ceremony's start time. The bride was nowhere to be seen. She's not going to show, one guest whispered. She wouldn't dare, another replied, glancing nervously at Evelyn. Finally, the heavy oak doors creaked open, and all heads turned. Charlie entered, her emerald eyes blazing with defiance. Instead of the traditional flowing gown Evelyn had chosen for her, she wore a sleek, modern dress with sharp lines that clung to her figure. Her auburn hair was swept into a loose, rebellious braid, and her heels clicked loudly on the marble floor as she walked. The room buzzed with hushed voices. Charlie's entrance was a statement. She wasn't here to comply quietly. At the altar, Luke stood stoically, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that accentuated his broad shoulders. His piercing blue eyes met Charlie's, unreadable but steady. You're late, he said softly as she approached. Charlie smirked. Wouldn't want to make this too easy for you. The officiant cleared his throat, sensing the charged energy between the couple. Shall we begin? The vows were exchanged with minimal enthusiasm. Charlie's words dripped with sarcasm, while Luke kept his responses curt and formal. But as much as Charlie tried to treat the ceremony as a farce, she couldn't ignore the weight of Luke's gaze. There was something about his calm, unyielding presence that unsettled her. When it was time for the kiss, Charlie hesitated. Luke leaned in, his expression neutral but firm, and their lips met briefly. The contact sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Do you think it's real? Someone whispered. It has to be a PR stunt, another replied. As the ceremony ended, the reception began in full swing. Guests were greeted with champagne towers and a string quartet, playing softly in the background. Evelyn moved through the crowd, like a queen surveying her subjects, ensuring every detail was flawless. At the center of the reception hall, a podium stood waiting for her speech. When Evelyn finally took the microphone, the room fell silent. "Thank you all for joining us on this special day," she began, her voice smooth and commanding. "Today we celebrate not just the union of Charlotte and Luke, but a testament to the strength and resilience of the Hayes family." Charlie clenched her jaw, her hand tightening around the stem of her champagne flute. She felt like a pawn in Evelyn's perfectly orchestrated game. Evelyn continued, her words laced with subtle digs at her daughter's past behavior. "Luke all represents the values this family holds dear: discipline, loyalty, and hard work. I trust that together, he and Charlotte will uphold the Hayes legacy." The applause was polite but hesitant. Luke's expression remained impassive, though his hand tightened briefly around his glass. As the night wore on, Charlie retreated to the quieter corners of the reception. She had spent hours plastering a smile on her face, exchanging pleasantries with guests who barely hid their curiosity. Luke found her by the garden, leaning against a marble pillar with a glass of wine in hand. "Escaping the circus?" he asked, his tone dry. She glanced at him, surprised by his sudden presence. "Something like that." They stood in silence for a moment, the distant hum of the reception fading into the background. "You were quiet during the speeches," Charlie said eventually. "What was there to say?" Luke replied. "This isn't my party." Charlie frowned, sensing an edge to his words. "Then why play along? Why agree to this at all?" Luke hesitated, then looked away. "It's complicated." Before she could press him further, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing. "What is it?" Charlie asked, curious despite herself. Luke didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pocketed the phone and looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Nothing you need to worry about." Charlie crossed her arms. "You're a terrible liar." Luke didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the reception, leaving Charlie alone with her thoughts. Later that night, long after the guests had left and the estate had fallen silent, Luke sat alone in the guest house. The cryptic text he had received earlier lingered in his mind. "You're in deeper than you think. Watch your back." Luke's jaw tightened as he reread the message. Whoever had sent it knew something, perhaps about Evelyn's manipulations, or worse, his own past. He glanced toward the bedroom door, where Charlie's light was still on. Despite their rocky start, he couldn't shake the feeling that she, too, was a victim in Evelyn's grand scheme. "Just 1 year," he muttered to himself. "Get through this, and it'll all be over." But deep down, Luke knew that nothing about this arrangement would ever be simple. The first morning of their married life dawned gray and silent over the sprawling Hayes estate. For Charlie, the clouded sky seemed an apt reflection of her mood. She stared at the ceiling of the guesthouse bedroom, the pristine white sheets rumpled from a restless night. The wedding might have been over, but the consequences of her mother's ultimatum had only begun to take root. The guesthouse, though tastefully designed, felt more like a gilded cage, trapping her with a man she barely knew and didn't trust. The guesthouse was a world away from the main estate, a calculated decision by Evelyn to keep the newlyweds isolated. The airy living room, adorned with modern art and plush furniture, felt sterile despite its luxury. Luke occupied himself by organizing his sparse belongings, while Charlie paced the floor, her frustration bubbling over. "This is ridiculous," Charlie muttered, glaring at Luke as he unpacked a duffel bag filled with neatly folded shirts and worn military boots. "You don't even look comfortable here." Luke didn't glance up. It's a roof over my head. That's enough. For you, maybe, she shot back. I'm used to more than just enough. Luke finally looked at her, his piercing blue eyes steady. Then maybe you should have thought about that before agreeing to this. Charlie bristled. Don't act like you're some martyr. You agreed to this circus just as much as I did. The tension in the room was thick, but Luke's calm demeanor only seemed to enrage Charlie further. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Charlie's rebellion began immediately. She spent most of her days avoiding the guest house, retreating to the main estate, where Evelyn hovered like a hawk. One evening, Charlie slipped out to meet her friends for a late-night party in Manhattan, eager to drown her frustrations in cocktails and shallow conversation. The night was a blur of flashing lights, deafening music, and whispered questions about her new husband. Her friends, all wealthy socialites, were eager to dissect the scandalous union. Marrying the driver, one of them scoffed. That's a new low, even for Evelyn. Charlie forced a laugh, though the sting of their words lingered. By the time she left the club, her car wouldn't start. Standing in the cold, she swallowed her pride and dialed Luke's number. He arrived within the hour, pulling up in the Hayes family sedan. As Charlie climbed into the passenger seat, she was met with silence. You're not going to lecture me, she asked, breaking the tension. Luke's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm not your babysitter. His curt response cut deeper than she expected, and the rest of the drive was spent in heavy silence. When they returned to the guest house, the argument exploded. You think you're better than me, Charlie accused, her voice shaking. But you're just as stuck in this mess as I am. Luke turned to face her, his expression hard. I don't think I'm better than you, Charlie. I just don't waste my energy blaming other people for my choices. His words hit like a slap, leaving Charlie speechless. Despite their constant clashes, small moments began to shift Charlie's perception of Luke. She noticed the way he meticulously cared for the car fleet, treating even the simplest tasks with quiet dignity. He often retreated to his room, where she once overheard him speaking softly to his sister Mia, who seemed to be the only person capable of softening his gruff exterior. One afternoon, while wandering through the garage, Charlie stumbled upon a framed photograph on Luke's workbench. It was of a younger Luke in military fatigues, standing with a group of soldiers in a desert landscape. The image stirred something unfamiliar in her. Curiosity, maybe even admiration. Later that evening, she approached him. You were in the military? Luke glanced at her, surprised by the question. Yeah, a long time ago. Why did you leave? His expression darkened, and for a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Because sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything. The weight of his words hung between them, and Charlie felt an unexpected pang of empathy. One stormy evening, the power went out in the guest house, plunging it into darkness. With no distractions, Charlie and Luke were forced to share the same space in uneasy silence. Sitting across from each other by candlelight, they began to talk, not as adversaries, but as two people trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Luke shared stories of his time in the military, the guilt he carried over decisions he had made, and the deep sense of responsibility he felt for his sister. Charlie, in turn, opened up about her struggles growing up under Evelyn's iron rule, always striving for approval, but never feeling good enough. For the first time, they saw each other not as enemies, but as flawed individuals fighting their own battles. You're not what I expected, Charlie admitted softly. Neither are you, Luke replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Later that night, unable to sleep, Charlie wandered into the main house. The power had returned, and she found herself drawn to her father's old study, a place she hadn't entered in years. Rummaging through the dusty shelves, she found a leather-bound journal. Her father's handwriting filled the pages, detailing his thoughts and fears in the final years of his life. One entry caught her eye. Evelyn's ambition knows no bounds. I fear for what she'll do to keep control of this family. I must protect Charlie at all costs. Charlie's heart pounded as she read the words. Her father had known Evelyn's true nature, and he had tried to shield her from it. Clutching the journal, Charlie realized that her mother's ultimatum was only the tip of the iceberg. Whatever Evelyn was hiding, it was bigger and far more dangerous than she had imagined. Back at the guest house, Charlie confronted Luke, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. We're in this together, whether we like it or not, she said. Luke raised an eyebrow. What brought on the sudden change of heart? She held up the journal. Because I think my mother has more secrets than either of us realized, and if we're going to survive this, we need to work together. Luke nodded, his expression unreadable. Then, let's start digging. The tension between Charlie and Luke had begun to ease, their reluctant partnership forged in the fires of shared vulnerability and Evelyn's relentless manipulations. But as the days passed, Charlie couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest since finding her father's journal. Something about Evelyn's ultimatum seemed too calculated, as if the marriage was just one piece in a much larger puzzle. Charlie was restless, unable to focus on anything but the cryptic warnings scattered throughout her father's journal. His words hinted at a web of deceit spun by Evelyn, but the details were maddeningly vague. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to take the risk of snooping in Evelyn's private study. Late one evening, when Evelyn was out at a gala, Charlie crept into the main estate. The study was cold and imposing, its walls lined with shelves of leather-bound books that felt more decorative than functional. The air smelled faintly of Evelyn's favorite lavender perfume, a detail that made Charlie shudder. Rummaging through the heavy oak desk, she found neatly arranged files. Most were innocuous, business reports, property deeds, but one folder marked confidential caught her eye. Inside were documents linking Evelyn to offshore accounts, shell companies, and payments to shadowy entities. The amounts were staggering, enough to fund a small country. Charlie's heart raced as she snapped photos of the documents with her phone. But it wasn't just the money that troubled her. The names listed on some of the transactions hinted at ties to illicit activities, bribery, fraud, and worse. She froze when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly closing the folder, she slipped it back into the drawer and turned off the light. As the door creaked open, she ducked behind a tall armchair, her heart pounding. Evelyn entered, her silhouette sharp against the dim light of the hallway. She stood still for a moment, as if sensing something was off, before crossing to the desk. Charlie held her breath, praying Evelyn wouldn't notice anything amiss. After a few tense minutes, Evelyn left, her heels clicking ominously on the hardwood floor. Charlie waited until the house was silent before slipping out of the study, her mind spinning with the implications of what she had found. Back at the guest house, Charlie shared her findings with Luke, who listened intently, his jaw tightening with every revelation. "She's hiding more than I thought," Charlie said, pacing the small living room. "This isn't just about controlling me. It's about protecting herself." Luke leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "You need to be careful, Charlie. Evelyn isn't the type to let someone dig into her affairs without retaliation." Charlie scoffed. "You think I don't know that? She's been controlling my life for as long as I can remember. But I'm done playing her game." Luke's gaze softened. "Just promise me you won't do anything reckless if she finds out you're onto her." "She'll try to shut me down," Charlie finished, her expression hardening. Let her try. The next morning, Evelyn summoned Charlie to the dining room for breakfast. The air was heavy with unspoken tension as they sat across from each other, a lavish spread between them. Evelyn's eyes were cold, her smile brittle. "You've been quiet lately," Evelyn said, cutting into her eggs with precision. "I trust married life hasn't been too taxing." Charlie matched her mother's icy tone. "It's been enlightening." Evelyn set down her fork, her gaze sharpening. "I hope you're not forgetting our agreement, Charlotte. You have a role to play, and I expect you to fulfill it." "Funny," Charlie said, leaning back in her chair. "I was just thinking the same thing about you." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Charlotte. You wouldn't want certain truths to come to light." Charlie's stomach twisted, but she refused to flinch. "What's that supposed to mean?" Evelyn's lips curved into a smirk. "Oh, nothing. Just a reminder that your father wasn't the only one with secrets." Charlie's breath caught as the implication hit her. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn rose gracefully from her seat, her composure unshaken. "Let's just say, Charlotte, that your lineage isn't as pristine as you've been led to believe. Perhaps you should focus less on meddling in my affairs and more on securing your place in this family." The words lingered long after Evelyn left, planting seeds of doubt that Charlie couldn't ignore. Charlie confided in Luke later that evening, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "She's trying to rattle me. But what if she's telling the truth? What if my father wasn't my father?" Luke frowned. "Does it change who you are?" "No," Charlie admitted. "But it changes everything I thought I knew about my life." Luke placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Then let's find out the truth. Together." Their moment of unity was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Meredith Hayes, Charlie's estranged aunt. Meredith, a sharp-witted woman with silver hair and a penchant for defying Evelyn, had been a pariah in the Hayes family for years. "I hear you've been poking the dragon," Meredith said, her voice laced with dry humor as she stepped inside. Charlie arched an eyebrow. "How do you know?" "Because Evelyn's been in a foul mood all week," Meredith replied. "And I make it my business to know what ruffles her feathers." Charlie hesitated before showing Meredith the photos of the documents she'd found. To her surprise, Meredith's expression turned grim. "This is worse than I thought," Meredith said. "She's been using the family business as a front for years, and she's willing to destroy anyone who gets in her way." Charlie's resolve hardened. "Then, it's time to stop her." That night, Evelyn made her move. A leaked story appeared in the tabloids, painting Charlie as an unstable socialite and Luke as a manipulative gold digger who had married into wealth for personal gain. The headlines were brutal. "Heiress spirals as scandalous marriage unravels the Hayes legacy." Luke was livid. "She's trying to discredit both of us." Charlie clenched her fists. "Let her. If she wants a war, we'll give her one." As they strategized their next steps, Charlie couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn was playing a game of chess, and she and Luke were still learning the rules. But as Luke stood beside her, unwavering in his support, she realized she wasn't alone. Together, they would unravel Evelyn's schemes and fight for the truth, no matter the cost. The days following the tabloid scandal were a blur of damage control and strategic planning. Charlie and Luke had grown accustomed to fighting Evelyn's schemes together, but an unexpected visitor would soon force them to confront a new threat, this time from Luke's buried past. It was a crisp morning when the knock came at the guesthouse door. Luke opened it to find a man standing on the porch, his expression hardened by years of hardship. Alex Hart, a former platoon member from Luke's military days, stepped inside, carrying an air of resentment. "I didn't think I'd find you here, Carter," Alex said, his tone sharp. Luke stiffened, his hand gripping the doorframe. "What are you doing here, Alex?" "I heard about your marriage," Alex replied, his gaze flicking to Charlie, who stood in the kitchen, watching the exchange with curiosity. "Figured I'd pay a visit to see if the rumors were true." Charlie stepped forward, her arms crossed. "And you are?" "An old friend of Luke's," Alex said, though his tone lacked warmth. "Or, at least, I used to be." Luke's jaw tightened. "Alex, whatever you came here for, now's not the time." Alex ignored him, his focus shifting back to Charlie. "Did he tell you why he left the military? Or how many people he abandoned in the process?" "Enough." Luke's voice cut through the tension. "You don't know what you're talking about." Charlie frowned, sensing there was more to the story than Luke let on. But Alex's words left a lingering unease that she couldn't ignore. That night, Luke sat alone on the porch, the weight of Alex's visit pressing heavily on his shoulders. Charlie joined him, hesitant but determined to get answers. "Who was he, Luke?" she asked softly. Luke sighed, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We served together in Afghanistan. There was a mission. Things went south. Alex blames me for what happened." "What happened?" Charlie pressed gently. Luke hesitated, the memories raw and painful. "We were ambushed. I was the one in charge, made the call to retreat, but not everyone made it out. Alex lost his brother that day, and he's never forgiven me." Charlie reached for his hand. "It wasn't your fault." Luke shook his head. "It doesn't matter. I was supposed to protect them. I failed." A storm rolled in later that evening, cutting the power and plunging the guest house into darkness. Luke lit a few candles, their soft glow casting shadows across the room. The storm's howling winds created an eerie backdrop as Charlie and Luke sat in the living room, their usual defenses stripped away by the intimacy of the moment. "I've never told anyone about that mission," Luke admitted, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Not even Mia." Charlie studied him, her heart aching at the pain etched into his features. "You don't have to carry that alone, Luke." Luke looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Why do you care?" "Because I know what it's like to live in someone else's shadow," Charlie replied. "To feel like you'll never measure up, no matter what you do." For the first time, Luke saw the vulnerability beneath Charlie's defiance. She wasn't just the spoiled heiress he'd assumed her to be. She was someone who understood pain, loss, and the weight of impossible expectations. As the storm subsided, Luke's phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made his stomach drop. "War hero or opportunist? Luke Carter's checkered past uncovered." The accompanying article painted him as a deserter who had abandoned his team, with quotes from anonymous sources that mirrored Alex's accusations. "It's Evelyn," Charlie said, anger flashing in her eyes. "She's trying to destroy you." Luke's expression darkened. "She's using Alex against me." Determined to fight back, Charlie called her estranged aunt, Meredith, for advice. Meredith agreed to help them counter Evelyn's smear campaign, but her warnings were clear. "Evelyn won't stop until she's crushed both of you. You need to be ready for her next move." The next day, Luke confronted Alex at a local bar, determined to set the record straight. "You went to the press," Luke accused, his voice low but menacing. Alex didn't deny it. "People deserve to know who you really are." Luke clenched his fists, but Charlie's words echoed in his mind, urging him to take a different approach. "I didn't come here to fight, Alex. I came to tell you the truth." For the next hour, Luke recounted the events of the ambush in painstaking detail, his voice breaking as he described the choices he'd made and the lives that were lost. Alex listened in silence, his anger gradually giving way to something more complicated. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked, his tone softer. "Because I couldn't face it," Luke admitted. "But I'm done running from my mistakes." Meanwhile, Evelyn doubled down on her efforts to discredit Luke and Charlie. She orchestrated a press conference, framing herself as a concerned mother, trying to protect her family from Luke's supposed deceit. "I only want what's best for my daughter," Evelyn said, her crocodile tears convincing the audience. "But I fear she's fallen under the influence of someone with ulterior motives." The press ate it up, painting Charlie as a rebellious daughter, blinded by love, and Luke as a scheming outsider. Charlie watched the coverage from the guest house, seething with rage. "She's turning the world against us." Luke placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Then we show them who we really are." As the storm clouds cleared, both literally and figuratively, Charlie and Luke resolved to fight Evelyn's lies with the truth. They reached out to Meredith, who agreed to help them gather evidence of Evelyn's corruption and her role in the tabloid scandal. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars, Charlie turned to Luke with a newfound sense of purpose. "We're not just fighting for us, Luke. We're fighting for everyone. She's hurt." Luke nodded, his gaze steady. "And we won't stop until she's exposed." The morning air around the Hayes estate was cool and crisp, with the golden light of sunrise casting long shadows over the manicured lawns. For the first time since their forced marriage, a fragile sense of unity began to form between Charlie and Luke. Their shared struggles against Evelyn's relentless schemes had planted the seeds of mutual respect, and those seeds were beginning to grow. The latest round of Evelyn's manipulations had left a bitter taste in Charlie's mouth. At a local charity gala, Evelyn insisted Charlie attend to maintain their family's public image. An unflattering rumor about Luke began circulating. Whispers floated through the air like poison, claiming he was nothing more than a con man who had duped Charlie into marriage. Charlie, who typically avoided these events like the plague, found herself bristling with anger. As one attendee, an older woman dripping in diamonds, sneered about Luke's questionable background, Charlie couldn't stay silent. "Funny," Charlie interjected, her voice cool but cutting. "The same people spreading lies about my husband are the ones who fawn over my mother's facade. Maybe focus on your own skeletons before you judge someone who's more honest than all of us combined." The room fell silent. Charlie's fiery defense shocked even herself, but she refused to back down. Luke, standing nearby in a well-tailored suit that Evelyn had begrudgingly paid for, caught her gaze. His expression was unreadable, but a flicker of appreciation shone in his eyes. After the gala, Charlie reached out to her estranged aunt Meredith, hoping for guidance. Meredith Hayes, a sharp-witted woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense attitude, had been exiled from the family years ago after challenging Evelyn's dominance over the family business. "I never thought I'd hear from you," Meredith said, her voice a mix of surprise and warmth as they met at a quiet cafe outside the city. "I need your help," Charlie admitted, her tone unusually humble. "Evelyn's trying to ruin Luke, and I think she's hiding something bigger. There's too much at stake to let her win." Meredith leaned back, a wry smile playing on her lips. "So, the prodigal niece returns. Tell me everything." As Charlie poured out the details of Evelyn's latest schemes, Meredith's expression darkened. "I always suspected Evelyn was capable of anything to protect her empire. But this is worse than I imagined." Meredith revealed that years ago, Evelyn had orchestrated a hostile takeover of the family business, cutting Meredith's husband out of his rightful share. She hinted that Evelyn's thirst for control had only grown stronger since then, and she promised to help Charlie and Luke uncover the full extent of her corruption. Back at the guest house, Luke was tending to the small garden behind their home, a habit he found calming amid the chaos of their lives. Charlie joined him, leaning against the wooden fence as she relayed what she'd learned from Meredith. "She's been doing this for years," Charlie said, her tone incredulous. "Lying, scheming, ruining lives. How did I not see it before?" "Because she's good at it," Luke replied, wiping dirt from his hands. "But now we have something she doesn't, a reason to fight." Charlie studied him, her heart softening. "Why do you keep fighting, Luke? You could have walked away. From this marriage. From me." Luke met her gaze, his expression steady. "Because I don't run from people I care about." The simplicity of his words struck a chord in Charlie. For so long, she had believed loyalty was transactional, a tool Evelyn wielded to control those around her. But with Luke, loyalty was a choice, a selfless, unwavering commitment. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a phone call. It was Mia, Luke's younger sister, her voice trembling. "Luke, there's someone watching the house." "What do you mean?" Luke asked, his tone sharp with concern. "A man. He's been parked outside for hours," Mia said. "He took pictures when I went outside." Luke's fists clenched. "Stay inside and lock the doors. I'll handle it." Evelyn's private investigator was clearly escalating the pressure, targeting Luke's most vulnerable point, his sister. Furious, Luke drove to Mia's home, with Charlie by his side. When they arrived, the car was gone, but the evidence of Evelyn's meddling was clear. "She'll stop at nothing," Charlie muttered as she helped Mia inside. Luke's jaw tightened. "If she thinks she can use Mia to get to me, she's made a mistake." Later that evening, Luke and Charlie returned to the guest house, exhausted but more determined than ever to stand their ground. Over dinner, they discussed their next steps. "We need to expose her, not just for what she's doing to us, but for everything she's done to everyone else," Charlie said, her voice resolute. "Meredith has connections. She can help us dig deeper." Luke nodded, his respect for Charlie growing. "And we need to protect Mia. I'll move her here if I have to." As the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Charlie found herself laughing for the first time in weeks. Luke's dry humor and steady presence were a balm for her frayed nerves, and she realized how much she had come to rely on him, not just as a partner in their fight against Evelyn, but as someone she could trust completely. But their momentary peace was short-lived. The next morning, a package arrived at the guest house, addressed to Charlie. Inside was a photograph of Mia, taken through the window of her home, with a note that read, "Back off, or she pays the price." Charlie's hands shook as she showed the note to Luke. "She's escalating." Luke's expression darkened. "Then so will we." Determined to protect their loved ones and bring Evelyn to justice, Charlie and Luke reached out to Meredith to accelerate their investigation. They knew that Evelyn's power was built on fear and manipulation, but together, they were determined to dismantle her empire, piece by piece. The Hayes estate, with its cold marble floors and sprawling grandeur, now felt more like a battlefield than a home. Evelyn's presence loomed over every corner of Charlie and Luke's lives, and her latest threats signaled that she was prepared to escalate her schemes to unprecedented levels. The morning started with an unsettling silence. Charlie was scrolling through her phone when her eyes landed on a tabloid headline plastered across the screen. "Hayes heiress, caught in love triangle scandal." The article detailed a fabricated affair between Luke and a woman named Alexandra Bishop, a name Charlie didn't recognize, but one clearly tied to Evelyn's machinations. The accompanying photos were doctored, grainy images of Luke at a cafe with a woman who vaguely resembled Alexandra. Charlie stormed into the study, clutching her phone. Luke was already there, the same article pulled up on his laptop. "She's trying to frame you," Charlie said, her voice laced with frustration. Luke leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but resolute. "It's Evelyn. This is just the beginning." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Meredith, arriving with more information she had uncovered about Evelyn's financial manipulations. "I've seen this tactic before," Meredith said, setting down a folder. "Evelyn distracts the public with scandal while she moves her real schemes into play. We need to be smarter than her." Determined to counter the narrative, Charlie and Luke decided to confront the scandal head-on. They arranged a press conference, a bold move that left Evelyn scrambling to regain control. Charlie, dressed in a sharp blazer, stood at the podium with Luke by her side. "The allegations against my husband are false," she said, her voice steady. "This is another attempt by individuals with ulterior motives to discredit us. We won't be intimidated." Luke stepped forward, adding, "My past and present are open books. Anyone who truly knows me, including my wife, understands that trust and integrity are the foundation of my life." Their honesty resonated with the audience, and public opinion began to sway in their favor. The conference ended with reporters firing questions at Charlie, but she walked away, with her head held high, refusing to let Evelyn's tactics dictate her narrative. Meanwhile, Meredith and Charlie worked tirelessly to unravel one of Evelyn's most significant deceptions, a fraudulent contract that had cut out Meredith's husband from his rightful share of the family business. The document, buried deep in a stack of seemingly innocuous files, revealed a web of lies and forged signatures. "This is the smoking gun," Meredith said, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. "If we take this to court, Evelyn won't just lose her power. She could face the serious criminal charges." As they strategized their next move, Luke offered his insight. "Evelyn won't go down without a fight. We need to prepare for her retaliation." Despite the chaos surrounding them, Charlie and Luke found solace in each other. Late one evening, after hours of sifting through documents, they sat together on the couch in the guest house. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if we hadn't been forced into this marriage?" Charlie asked, her voice soft. Luke hesitated before replying, "Honestly, I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. It just would have taken longer." Charlie looked at him, surprised by his sincerity. "You really believe that?" "I do," Luke said, his voice steady. "You're stronger than you realize, Charlie. And I'm starting to think we make a pretty good team." The walls between them, once fortified by mistrust and resentment, were now crumbling. For the first time, Charlie allowed herself to see Luke not as an adversary, but as an ally. And perhaps something more. As Charlie and Luke grew closer, Evelyn grew more desperate. She scheduled an exclusive televised interview, during which she revealed a bombshell. Charlie's biological father was not Edward Hayes, but a convicted felon named Richard Dempsey. Evelyn painted herself as a victim, claiming she had protected Charlie from this truth to shield her from public scrutiny. The interview sent shockwaves through the media. Charlie watched it from the guest house, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the couch. "She's trying to humiliate me," Charlie said, her voice shaking with anger. Luke placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then let's use this against her. People will see through her lies if we stay strong." The revelation of Charlie's biological father created a media frenzy. Reporters camped outside the estate, hungry for more details. Instead of succumbing to the pressure, Charlie decided to take control of the narrative. In a heartfelt social media post, she wrote, "I've spent my life under the shadow of my mother's expectations, but no longer. The truth about my biological father doesn't define me, nor does it change my commitment to doing what's right. My husband and I will continue to fight for the legacy my real father built, a legacy of integrity, not lies." The post went viral, garnering widespread support. People began to see Charlie not as the spoiled heiress Evelyn had tried to paint her as, but as a determined woman, carving her own path. Amidst the chaos, Evelyn turned her attention back to Luke's sister, Mia. A private investigator began trailing her, taking photos and leaving ominous notes. When Luke confronted Evelyn at the estate, she smirked, her icy demeanor unwavering. "You should know by now, Luke," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with malice. "I always find a way to win." Luke clenched his fists, but refused to be provoked. "Not this time," he said firmly. "You've underestimated us." That night, a package arrived at the guest house. Inside was an old photograph of Evelyn with a man who looked eerily similar to Richard Dempsey. The accompanying note read, "The truth is closer than you think. Don't trust anyone." The cryptic message left Charlie and Luke reeling. Who had sent the package, and why? As they pieced together the clues, one thing became clear. Evelyn's empire was built on more secrets than they had ever imagined. The tension that had been simmering for months reached a boiling point after Evelyn's televised revelation. The Hayes estate, once a symbol of opulence and control, now felt like the epicenter of a storm, with Charlie and Luke still caught in the crossfire of Evelyn's schemes. The morning after the broadcast, reporters swarmed the gates of the estate, shouting questions and snapping pictures. Headlines screamed, "Heiress Hayes' scandalous parentage," and "Secrets of the Hayes dynasty exposed." The media frenzy was exactly what Evelyn had intended, to shift the narrative and paint herself as a protective mother, sacrificing for her daughter's reputation. Inside the guest house, Charlie stared at the TV, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with determination. "She thinks she's won," Charlie muttered, pacing the room. "But I'm done letting her control me." Luke, seated at the kitchen table with his laptop, glanced up. "Then we fight back. But carefully. Evelyn's banking on you reacting emotionally." Charlie stopped pacing and looked at him. "You're right. She wants me to lose it. But this time I'm going to play her game better than she does." Determined to reclaim her narrative, Charlie enlisted Meredith's help to dig into the truth about Richard Dempsey. Together, they uncovered court documents and old newspaper articles that painted a picture of a man who had once been a respected philanthropist before being framed for embezzlement, a case Evelyn had played a significant role in. "He wasn't the monster she made him out to be," Charlie said, her voice thick with emotion. "She destroyed him to protect her image." Meredith nodded. "Evelyn's power has always been built on lies. It's time the world sees her for who she really is." Charlie decided to address the public directly. With Luke's support, she recorded a video from the guest house, speaking candidly about her biological father and the lies Evelyn had spun. "I've recently learned the truth about my father, Richard Dempsey," Charlie said, her voice steady but her eyes reflecting her pain. "For years, my mother painted him as a criminal, but the truth is far more complicated. He was a man wronged by the very system he tried to improve, a system my mother manipulated." The video went viral within hours, sparking public outrage against Evelyn. People began to question her integrity, and the once unshakable Hayes empire showed signs of crumbling. Still, as Charlie fought to clear her father's name, Luke continued to work behind the scenes, leveraging his network of veteran allies and local activists. Together, they organized a community event to raise awareness about corruption and the dangers of unchecked power. At the event, Luke spoke passionately about his experiences as a veteran and the importance of standing up for what's right. His speech resonated with the crowd, and by the end of the night, the Hayes name was no longer associated solely with scandal. It was also tied to hope and resilience. Unwilling to concede defeat, Evelyn orchestrated a new smear campaign. She leaked photos of Charlie's wild teenage years, parties, reckless behavior, and moments of vulnerability that painted her in a less than flattering light. The tabloids had a field day, but Charlie refused to be intimidated. "If she wants to drag me through the mud, let her," Charlie said to Luke. "I'm not hiding who I was. That person led me to who I am now." In a bold move, Charlie held a press conference where she addressed the photos head-on. "Yes, I made mistakes. I was young, reckless, and trying to find myself in a world that demanded perfection. But I won't let my past define me, and I won't let it distract from the truth about my mother's actions." Her honesty earned her widespread support, with many praising her courage in the face of adversity. One evening, as Charlie and Meredith sifted through more of Evelyn's records, they stumbled upon a folder labeled Project Dempsey. Inside were detailed plans outlining how Evelyn had orchestrated Richard Dempsey's downfall, complete with forged documents and evidence of bribes paid to key officials. "This is it," Meredith whispered, her hands trembling. "This is the proof we need to clear Richard's name and take Evelyn down." But as they celebrated their discovery, Luke received a panicked call from Mia. "There's someone outside the house," she whispered. "They've been watching me for hours." Luke's blood ran cold. "Lock the doors and stay on the phone with me," he said, grabbing his keys. "I'm on my way." Luke's protective instincts kicked into high gear. He arrived at Mia's home to find her shaken but unharmed. The intruder had disappeared, leaving behind a note that read, "Stay out of this, or else." The threat only strengthened Luke's resolve. "Evelyn's losing control," he told Charlie later that night. "She's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." Armed with the evidence from Project Dempsey, Charlie and Meredith prepared to confront Evelyn publicly. They planned a press conference, inviting journalists and key figures from the business and legal communities. When the day arrived, the room was packed. Charlie stood at the podium, holding up the damning documents. "For years, my mother has built her empire on lies and manipulation. Today, I'm here to expose the truth." The room erupted with questions as Charlie detailed Evelyn's actions, culminating in the revelation of Project Dempsey. Meredith added her voice, recounting the personal toll Evelyn's greed had taken on their family. The fallout was immediate. Investigations were launched into Evelyn's business dealings, and the once unassailable matriarch found herself cornered. Public opinion turned sharply against her, with many calling for her resignation from the board of Hayes Industries. Charlie and Luke, meanwhile, stood together as a united front. Their bond, forged through adversity, had grown stronger with each challenge. As the dust began to settle, a mysterious letter arrived at the guest house. Addressed to Charlie, it contained a single line: "The truth you've uncovered is just the beginning." The turmoil surrounding the Hayes family reached its peak, but amidst the chaos, a quiet resolve settled over Charlie. She had endured scandal, manipulation, and betrayal, yet she emerged from each trial stronger and more determined to take control of her life and to dismantle the empire her mother had corrupted. In the weeks following Evelyn's public exposure, Charlie threw herself into action. The Hayes empire, though tarnished, was still a sprawling conglomerate. With Evelyn under investigation and stripped of her authority, Charlie saw an opportunity to redefine the company's legacy. "I'm not going to let her destroy everything," Charlie told Luke during a late-night brainstorming session at the guest house. The Hayes name doesn't have to be synonymous with greed and corruption. It can mean something better. Luke, ever her steady anchor, nodded. "Then let's make it better. But we can't do this alone." Charlie reached out to Meredith, who had spent years as an outsider, but still possessed a deep understanding of the family's business operations. Together, they began assembling a team of trusted allies, individuals with integrity and a shared vision for ethical leadership. One of their first recruits was Daniel Corbin, a young financial analyst who had previously resigned from Hayes Industries after refusing to falsify reports. "I never thought I'd come back here," Daniel admitted during their meeting. "But if you're serious about cleaning up the company, I'm in." The team also included Sophia Nguyen, a sustainability expert who had clashed with Evelyn over environmental policies, and Robert Gaines, a retired executive with a reputation for championing employee rights. While Charlie worked to restructure the company, Luke focused on his nonprofit for veterans. Inspired by his experiences and the resilience of those around him, he launched a series of programs aimed at providing housing, mental health support, and job training. The nonprofit, named Valor Rising, quickly gained traction, drawing support from both the community and national organizations. Luke's dedication to the cause not only strengthened his sense of purpose, but also highlighted his ability to lead and inspire others. During one event, Luke invited Charlie to speak about her journey. Standing before a crowd of veterans and their families, Charlie shared her story of overcoming adversity and finding strength in unexpected places. Her words resonated deeply, solidifying her role as a changemaker in her own right. As Charlie and Meredith delved deeper into the company's records, they discovered a hidden layer of Evelyn's corruption. Buried among the files was evidence of a shadowy partnership with international entities involved in money laundering and illegal trade. "This isn't just about Hayes Industries," Meredith said, her voice tinged with urgency. "She's connected to something much bigger." The discovery added a new layer of complexity to their mission. While they initially aimed to reform the company, they too faced the challenge of dismantling a web of illicit dealings that extended far beyond their family. To regain the public's trust, Charlie and her team launched a transparent campaign, highlighting their efforts to rebuild Hayes Industries. They hosted town halls, engaged with employees at every level, and implemented policies prioritizing sustainability, fairness, and accountability. One of their most impactful moves was announcing the creation of a foundation dedicated to supporting underprivileged communities, a direct response to the harm caused by Evelyn's practices. The foundation, named after Charlie's late father, Richard Dempsey, symbolized their commitment to justice and positive change. Not everyone welcomed the changes. Former executives loyal to Evelyn attempted to undermine Charlie's efforts, spreading rumors and obstructing initiatives. The tension culminated in a heated board meeting where Charlie faced off against her mother's longtime ally, Victor Long. "This company was built on hard-nosed decisions and unrelenting ambition," Victor argued. "Your idealism will destroy everything we've achieved." Charlie's response was measured but firm. "What we've achieved is a legacy of exploitation and deceit. If that's what you value, you're welcome to leave. This company is moving forward, with or without you." Her decisive stance earned her respect from the remaining board members and solidified her leadership. As the pressure mounted, Charlie and Luke found solace in each other. Their marriage, once a facade, had grown into a genuine partnership rooted in trust and mutual support. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the guest house, Luke handed Charlie a small wooden box. Inside was a simple gold bracelet engraved with the words, "Strength in Unity." "I know this journey hasn't been easy," Luke said, his voice steady. "But I want you to know you're not alone. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Charlie smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful every day that you're here." In a twist of fate, Evelyn's former lawyer, Rachel Pierce, approached Charlie with an unexpected offer. Disillusioned by Evelyn's manipulation, Rachel provided critical documents exposing key players in the larger corruption network. "I should have come forward sooner," Rachel admitted, "but I was afraid. Evelyn's power was overwhelming. Now, I want to make things right." With Rachel's help, Charlie and her team built an airtight case against the network, setting the stage for a broader investigation. The climactic moment of the Hayes family saga was drawing closer. With each revelation and every step forward, Charlie, Luke, and their allies had built an unstoppable momentum. Evelyn Hayes, once untouchable, was about to face the consequences of her misdeeds. Yet, even as victory loomed on the horizon, the stakes had never been higher. Preparations for the press conference were in full swing. The team had meticulously compiled evidence exposing Evelyn's crimes, fraudulent contracts, offshore accounts, and her ties to an international money laundering ring. Meredith worked tirelessly alongside Charlie, ensuring no stone was left unturned. "This isn't just about bringing Evelyn down," Meredith said one late night as they reviewed the final presentation. "It's about reclaiming the integrity of our family's name and giving justice to everyone she's hurt." Charlie nodded, her resolve unwavering. "She's had control over us for too long. It ends now." Meanwhile, Luke coordinated security for the event. His military background proved invaluable in anticipating potential threats. Evelyn's remaining loyalists were desperate and unpredictable. They wouldn't go down without a fight. True to form, Evelyn wasn't sitting idly by. From her penthouse, she orchestrated a campaign to discredit Charlie and her team. Leaked rumors painted Charlie as an opportunist, suggesting she was using the company's downfall for personal gain. "What Evelyn doesn't realize," Charlie remarked during a strategy meeting, "is that people are tired of her lies. The more she flails, the more obvious it becomes that she's grasping at straws." Still, the smear campaign rattled Charlie. Late one night, as she scrolled through inflammatory headlines, Luke found her in the guesthouse living room. He took the phone gently from her hands and said, "You've already won. She's just making noise. Don't let her get in your head." Charlie sighed, leaning into him. "It's hard not to. She's been in my head my whole life." Luke wrapped his arms around her. "Not anymore. You're in control now." The conference was held at a historic hotel in downtown Manhattan, a setting chosen for its grandeur and symbolic significance. As reporters and onlookers filled the ballroom, a palpable tension filled the air. Evelyn, ever the master of theatrics, made a surprise appearance. Flanked by her lawyers, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed she could still manipulate the narrative. When Charlie stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She was dressed in a sharp black suit, her posture exuding authority. Behind her, a large screen displayed the Hayes Industries logo, now paired with the tagline, "Integrity Reimagined." "Good afternoon," Charlie began, her voice steady but firm. "Today, we confront the truth, a truth that has been buried beneath lies, greed, and betrayal." Charlie unveiled the evidence methodically, starting with financial records that proved Evelyn's embezzlement. The screen displayed charts, bank statements, and signed documents that left no room for doubt. As the presentation continued, murmurs rippled through the audience. Evelyn's composed facade began to crack. She interrupted, her voice sharp. "This is slander. None of this will hold up in court." Charlie met her mother's gaze without flinching. "The only thing that won't hold up is your web of lies. You've underestimated everyone around you, and now the truth is catching up." The final blow came when Meredith took the stage. She revealed Evelyn's role in the cover-up of Richard Dempsey's death, presenting testimony from key witnesses and newly uncovered medical records. Gasps echoed through the room as the full scope of Evelyn's betrayal was laid bare. "This isn't just about corporate greed," Meredith said. "It's about the life she stole, the people she hurt, and the family she destroyed." As the press conference concluded, law enforcement officers entered the room. A hush fell over the crowd as they approached Evelyn. "This is outrageous," Evelyn shouted as she was handcuffed. "You'll regret this, all of you." Charlie watched in silence, her expression unreadable. As her mother was escorted out, a mixture of relief and sorrow washed over her. For all her faults, Evelyn was still the woman who had raised her, however imperfectly. Luke appeared by Charlie's side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it," she corrected, glancing at him with gratitude. In the days following the press conference, the public's response was overwhelmingly supportive. Charlie's courage and transparency earned her widespread admiration, and Hayes Industries began the slow process of rebuilding its reputation. The company's transformation became a case study in redemption. Under Charlie's leadership, new policies prioritized ethical practices, environmental sustainability, and community engagement. Luke's nonprofit, Valor Rising, also saw a surge in support. Inspired by his story, donors and volunteers flocked to the cause, allowing him to expand programs for veterans and their families. One evening, as Charlie and Luke walked through the estate gardens, they reflected on how far they had come. The moon cast a soft glow over the path, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. "I never thought this is where I'd end up," Charlie admitted, "fighting for something real, something that matters." Luke smiled. "You've always had it in you. You just needed the right reason to fight." As they reached the edge of the garden, a courier approached with an envelope. Charlie opened it, her heart sinking as she read the contents. It was a letter from Evelyn, written before her arrest. "Dear Charlotte," it began, "if you're reading this, it means you think you've won. But don't be so sure. There are things you don't know, things that could change everything." As Charlie read the letter, her mind raced with questions. What secrets could Evelyn still be hiding? And how would they impact the fragile peace she had worked so hard to achieve? Luke noticed the concern etched on her face and asked, "What is it?" Charlie folded the letter and looked up at him. "It's Evelyn. Even behind bars, she's not done with us." The morning after Evelyn's arrest, the Hayes estate was quiet, yet it carried a new weight of change. For years, the sprawling mansion symbolized power and prestige, but now it felt like the remains of a battle, one that had shaken every pillar of the family's legacy. Charlie stood on the front steps of the estate, her gaze sweeping over the grounds. The gardens were immaculate. The fountains still trickled softly, but the veneer of perfection seemed thinner now. Luke approached her with 2 cups of coffee, his quiet strength, a welcome contrast to the chaos that had unfolded. "Are you ready for today?" Luke asked, handing her a cup. Charlie sighed. "Ready as I'll ever be. The board meeting is at noon, and then I've got a press briefing after. It feels like no matter how much we've accomplished, there's still so much left to do." Luke smiled. That's because there is. But you're not doing it alone anymore. His words were a small comfort as Charlie prepared to face the board of Hayes Industries. Many of its members had been complicit in Evelyn's schemes, turning a blind eye in exchange for their own gain. Now, with Evelyn behind bars, they were scrambling to salvage their positions. Charlie entered the boardroom with Meredith by her side. The atmosphere was tense, the room filled with wary glances and hushed whispers. Meredith opened the meeting with a sharp, pointed statement. "Let's not waste time pretending we didn't all know what Evelyn was doing," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "The question now is whether this board is capable of leading with integrity or if it's time for a complete overhaul." Charlie took the floor, presenting a comprehensive plan to restructure the company. Her proposals included stricter oversight, ethical hiring practices, and a focus on community engagement. She also called for the immediate resignation of 3 board members directly implicated in Evelyn's fraudulent activities. There was resistance, of course. One member, Douglas West, stood and challenged her. "You're young, inexperienced. What makes you think you can rebuild this company better than your mother?" Charlie met his gaze without flinching. "Because I've seen the damage done when power is misused, and I refuse to let it continue. Hayes Industries doesn't belong to Evelyn or to you. It belongs to the people who trusted us, the employees who depended on us, and the communities we're meant to serve." Meredith added her support, and after a heated discussion, the board voted overwhelmingly in favor of Charlie's plan. The 3 implicated members resigned on the spot, their exits marking a turning point for the company. With the board meeting behind her, Charlie turned her attention to the estate. She and Luke began planning ways to repurpose the sprawling property into something meaningful. Charlie proposed converting part of the estate into a community center, offering resources and programs for local families. "This place was built on the backs of others," she said during a brainstorming session. "It's time we give something back." Luke was fully on board. He offered to oversee the renovation efforts, drawing on his military experience to organize the project efficiently. Later that day, Charlie stood before a room full of reporters, her demeanor calm but determined. She began by addressing the scandal, acknowledging the pain and betrayal felt by employees, stakeholders, and the public. "I'm not here to make excuses," she said. "What my mother did was wrong, and it hurt countless people. But I am here to make amends. Hayes Industries will no longer be a company that thrives on greed and deception. We're starting over, with transparency, accountability, and a commitment to doing what's right." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Reporters asked tough questions, but Charlie handled them with grace, turning even the harshest critiques into opportunities to emphasize her vision for the future. As the days turned into weeks, Charlie began to transform not just the company, but herself. She took time to connect with employees, listening to their concerns and involving them in decision-making processes. Her humility and willingness to learn won over even the most skeptical critics. One evening, as she reviewed documents in the study, Luke walked in with a box of old photos. "Thought you might want to see these," he said, placing the box on the desk. Inside were pictures of Charlie as a child, many of them with her father. As she flipped through them, she felt a pang of nostalgia and regret. "I wish he were here," she said softly. Luke sat beside her. "He'd be proud of you, Charlie. You're doing something incredible." Meanwhile, Luke faced a difficult decision of his own. His nonprofit, Valor Rising, had grown significantly since Evelyn's downfall, but funding remained a constant challenge. When an investor offered to buy the organization outright, Luke was torn. Selling would provide the resources needed to expand programs for veterans, but it would also mean giving up control. After discussing it with Charlie, Luke made his decision. He told Valor Rising on the condition that he would stay involved as a consultant. The influx of funding allowed the nonprofit to open new centers across the country, helping thousands of veterans and their families. "It's not about me," Luke explained to Charlie. "It's about the people we're helping. That's what matters." In the midst of all the changes, Luke and Charlie's relationship deepened. One evening, as they walked through the estate gardens, Charlie surprised Luke by dropping to one knee. "I never thought I'd say this," she began, holding out a small box. "But you've shown me what love really means. I don't care about the money or the estate. I care about you. Will you marry me this time for real?" Luke laughed, pulling her to her feet. "You beat me to it," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his own ring. "But yes, 1,000 times yes." The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the guest house, casting a soft glow over the newlywed couple. Luke sat at the small dining table, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand, his brow furrowed as he read through a thick folder. The title on the front read, "Valor Rising, Expansion Proposal." Across the room, Charlie was getting ready for another meeting with the Hayes Foundation board, but she couldn't help noticing Luke's pensive expression. "Something on your mind?" Charlie asked, walking over to him and placing a hand on his shoulder. Luke sighed, closing the folder. "It's the proposal for the expansion. The investors want to fund the nonprofit, but there's a catch. They want majority control. It would mean we could help thousands more veterans, but I'd lose the ability to oversee the day-to-day operations." Charlie pulled out a chair and sat beside him. "That's a big decision. Do you trust them to carry your vision forward?" Luke hesitated. "They're good people, but letting go of control feels like giving up a piece of myself. Valor Rising was built from my experiences, my mistakes, and my desire to make things right. What if they take it in a direction that loses that heart?" Charlie reached for his hand. "Luke, whatever you decide, I know you'll do it for the right reasons. You've always been about helping others, even when it cost you personally." Over the next few days, Luke sought advice from those he trusted most. He met with his sister Mia, now thriving thanks to the resources Valor Rising provided for her medical care. She was unequivocal in her support. "You've done so much already," Mia said. "If letting go means you can help more people like me, then it's worth it." Luke also consulted Meredith, who had recently taken on a mentoring role within the Hayes Foundation. She offered a pragmatic perspective. "Sometimes leadership means stepping aside so others can carry the torch. It doesn't diminish what you've built. It amplifies it." Meanwhile, Charlie was deep in her work with the Hayes Foundation, using her growing influence to implement sweeping changes. She coordinated with community leaders, approved grants for grassroots organizations, and initiated a scholarship program for underprivileged students. Watching her navigate this new role with confidence and compassion filled Luke with pride and gave him clarity about his own decision. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner in the garden, Luke finally spoke. "I'm going to do it," he said. "I'm selling Valor Rising. The funding will open doors I never could have on my own." Charlie smiled, though her eyes brimmed with emotion. "I know how much this means to you. I'm so proud of you, Luke." The sale of Valor Rising was finalized at a public event attended by veterans, donors, and community leaders. Luke stood at the podium, addressing the crowd with humility and gratitude. "This organization started as a way for me to make amends for the things I couldn't change," he said. "But today, it's about all of you, your resilience, your courage, and your hope. This expansion isn't an ending. It's a new beginning." As he stepped down from the stage, Charlie was waiting for him, her eyes shining with pride. She wrapped her arms around him, and for a moment it felt like the weight of the world had lifted. A week after the event, Luke surprised Charlie with a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin in the Catskills. It was a place he had discovered during his military service, a refuge that had brought him peace during his darkest times. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Luke led Charlie to a clearing overlooking a serene lake. He knelt on one knee, holding out a simple yet elegant ring. "Charlie," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion, "you've shown me what it means to truly live, to love without fear. You've made me believe in second chances. Will you marry me, this time? Not because we have to, but because we want to." Charlie laughed through her tears. "You really had to one-up me, didn't you?" she teased, referring to her earlier proposal. "Yes, Luke. 1,000 times. Yes." Back at the estate, Luke and Charlie began planning their vow renewal ceremony, a symbolic fresh start for both of them. They decided to hold it on the grounds of the estate, transforming the once opulent property into a welcoming space for the community. The guest list included not just family and friends, but also beneficiaries of the Hayes Foundation and Valor Rising. Luke also worked closely with the new leadership of Valor Rising to ensure the nonprofit's mission remained intact. He found peace in mentoring the next generation of leaders, knowing his legacy was in good hands. As part of their preparations for the vow renewal, Charlie decided to auction off many of the estate's luxurious items, with the proceeds going toward the foundation. Among the items was Evelyn's infamous collection of rare art, which had once symbolized her wealth and power. "This isn't just about letting go of things," Charlie explained to Luke. "It's about letting go of the past and making room for something better." The vow renewal ceremony at the Hayes estate marked a turning point, not just for Charlie and Luke, but for the entire community they had come to embrace. The estate, which once symbolized power and control, now reflected inclusivity, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. As the guests departed after the vow renewal, Charlie stood on the sprawling lawn, surveying the remnants of the evening. String lights still twinkled above, and children's laughter echoed from a nearby play area, a new addition they had installed as part of the estate's transformation. "I never thought this place could feel warm," she said, turning to Luke, who stood beside her. "It's not the place," Luke replied, taking her hand. "It's what you've turned it into." The estate had been converted into the headquarters for the Hayes Foundation for Change, a nonprofit dedicated to uplifting underserved communities. What had once been gilded rooms filled with untouchable art now housed workshops, classrooms, and spaces for community gatherings. Charlie and Luke threw themselves into their work with renewed vigor. Together, they traveled to local schools and neighborhoods, listening to stories and understanding the struggles people faced. Charlie's earlier reputation as a spoiled heiress began to fade as her genuine passion for change became evident. One of their most ambitious initiatives was a scholarship fund for students from low-income families. Charlie spearheaded the program, personally mentoring some of the recipients. "I know what it feels like to have someone else dictate your future," she told a group of scholarship candidates during an orientation. "But you have the power to take control. This isn't about money. It's about giving you the freedom to dream." Luke, meanwhile, continued his work with veterans, expanding the reach of Valor Rising. With the new funding secured from the nonprofit's expansion, the organization launched programs across the country. Luke's mentorship extended beyond veterans. He began working with at-risk youth, teaching them discipline and resilience through outdoor survival courses. One particularly poignant moment came when Luke visited a group of young men at a juvenile detention center. He shared his story of failure, redemption, and finding purpose. "It's not about where you've been," he told them. "It's about where you decide to go from here." His words resonated deeply, and several of the youths later joined Valor Rising's programs, finding jobs and rebuilding their lives. Despite their progress, Evelyn's shadow lingered over their efforts. From prison, Evelyn still wielded influence, using her connections to tarnish the Foundation's reputation. A series of articles surfaced, accusing Charlie and Luca of mismanaging funds. A final attempt by Evelyn to regain control, even from behind bars. But Charlie was ready. Using the evidence she and Meredith had collected, she countered the accusations with irrefutable proof of Evelyn's past crimes and the Foundation's transparency. The media quickly turned in their favor, painting Evelyn as a desperate figure clinging to a lost empire. One evening, as Charlie and Luke reviewed their latest initiatives, Charlie received a letter from Evelyn. It was brief and cryptic. "You've won for now, but you're not done unraveling this family's secrets. You'll see." Charlie set the letter aside with a sigh. "She always has to have the last word." Luke squeezed her hand. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the Foundation grew, it attracted prominent partners and donors, including Charlie's estranged aunt Meredith. The two women had become close collaborators, finding solace in each other's determination to correct Evelyn's wrongs. During a press event announcing a new initiative, Meredith took the stage to address the crowd. "This foundation isn't just about change, it's about redemption. And no one embodies that more than Charlie Hayes." Charlie, humbled by the words, stepped forward to speak. "Redemption isn't a destination, it's a journey. One that Luke and I are committed to taking every single day. This isn't just about fixing the past, it's about building a future we can all believe in." Amid their work, Luke and Charlie found time to nurture their relationship. They took weekends off to hike the trails Luke loved, or to visit Mia, who had become a beloved ambassador for Valor Rising. Their bond deepened with each shared experience, their love becoming a steady anchor in the whirlwind of their new lives. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the guest house, Charlie turned to Luke with a mischievous smile. "You know," she began, "we've done a lot for the Foundation, but I think it's time we did something for us." Luke raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" "Travel," she said. "Let's see the world. Not for work, but for us. We've been so focused on building a future for everyone else, we deserve to live a little too." Luke chuckled. "You've got a point. Let's do it." As they planned their travels, Charlie and Luke also began discussing their future as a family. They decided to open their home to foster children, inspired by the resilience they had witnessed in the communities they served. Their first foster placement was a 10-year-old boy named Marcus, whose quiet demeanor reminded Luke of himself at that age. Over time, Marcus blossomed under their care, and the guest house became filled with laughter and life. The chapter ends with a grand gala hosted at the transformed estate, celebrating the one-year anniversary of the Hayes Foundation for Change. Guests from all walks of life attended, from scholarship recipients to veterans and community leaders. During her closing speech, Charlie looked out at the crowd, her heart full. "This estate once represented everything I hated about my life, power without purpose. Today, it stands as a testament to what we can achieve when we choose to lift each other up." As the audience applauded, Luke joined her on stage. Together, they represented the new legacy of the Hayes family, one built on compassion, resilience, and hope. The transformation of the Hayes legacy was not just a story of redemption, but also one of resilience, love, and the power of second chances. Charlie and Luke, once forced into a marriage orchestrated for control, had turned their union into a partnership that inspired change far beyond their initial expectations. The Hayes estate, now bustling with activities for the Hayes Foundation for Change, served as a beacon of hope. On a crisp autumn morning, Charlie walked the grounds, marveling at how far they had come. The estate was alive with children laughing, veterans sharing stories, and volunteers setting up for the upcoming community fair. Luke approached her, carrying a tray of coffee. "You know," he began, handing her a cup, "if someone had told me 2 years ago that this place would be filled with so much life, I wouldn't have believed them." Charlie smiled, taking a sip. "Neither would I. But here we are." The foundation had surpassed every expectation, with projects ranging from scholarships and housing initiatives to community health programs. At the heart of it all was Charlie, who had grown into a compassionate and driven leader. At a gala celebrating the foundation's achievements, Charlie addressed a crowd of supporters, partners, and beneficiaries. Her voice carried a blend of confidence and humility. "This foundation isn't just about giving back," she said. "It's about rewriting the narrative. It's about showing that no matter where we come from or what we've been through, we have the power to create change." While Charlie became the public face of the foundation, Luke remained steadfast in his behind-the-scenes role. He poured his heart into Valor Rising, expanding its reach to include mentorship programs for young men and women at risk. One evening, as they sat together reviewing their schedules, Luke hesitated before sharing a decision. "I've been thinking," he began. "It might be time to let someone else take over Valor Rising. Not because I don't care, but because I want to be more present for you. And for us." Charlie looked at him, her expression a mix of surprise and understanding. "Luke, that's your passion. Are you sure?" He nodded. "I've built something that can run without me now. And besides, I want to focus on building our family." The couple's decision to foster children had brought unexpected joy into their lives. Marcus, their first foster child, had become a permanent fixture in their family. Inspired by his resilience, Charlie and Luke decided to foster more children, creating a home that radiated warmth and acceptance. Their family grew with the addition of 2 siblings, Sophia and Leo, who had faced unimaginable hardships in their young lives. Through love and patience, Charlie and Luke helped them heal, reinforcing their belief that every child deserved a chance to thrive. Despite their success, the shadow of Evelyn Hayes lingered. From prison, Evelyn continued to make cryptic statements through her legal team, hinting at secrets she had yet to reveal. One such revelation came in the form of a letter addressed to Charlie, delivered by a lawyer. Inside was a handwritten note and a photograph. The note read, "Charlie, the truth is never as simple as it seems. Look closely at the people around you, and you'll find that not all allies are what they appear to be. Evelyn." The photograph showed a younger Evelyn, with a man Charlie didn't recognize. The cryptic message left her unsettled, but she resolved not to let it derail their progress. As the foundation expanded, Charlie and Luke encountered resistance from powerful figures who felt threatened by their work. Corporate executives, tied to practices that the foundation sought to expose, launched smear campaigns in an attempt to discredit them. Luke's military background and calm demeanor proved invaluable during these challenges. "We've faced worse," he reminded Charlie during one particularly intense week. "What matters is staying true to why we started this." Together, they pushed through the opposition, emerging stronger and more determined than ever. To mark their journey, Charlie and Luke planned a vow renewal ceremony. It was a symbolic gesture, not just for their relationship, but for the life they had built together. The ceremony took place in the garden of the estate, surrounded by their children, friends, and the community they had helped transform. As they exchanged vows, Charlie's voice broke with emotion. What began as something neither of us wanted became the greatest gift of my life. You've shown me the true meaning of love, strength, and partnership. Luke, ever the steady presence, responded, You've taught me that second chances aren't given. They're earned, and I'm grateful every day that we earned ours together. As the evening wound down, Charlie found herself alone still in her father's old study. She opened a drawer and discovered an envelope she had never seen before. Inside was a letter from her father, written shortly before his death. The letter revealed a secret he had kept hidden. Evelyn had manipulated him into signing over his shares of the family business, leaving him powerless in the empire he had built. I wanted to protect you from her, the letter read. But in the end, I failed. I hope you'll find the strength to reclaim what's rightfully yours. Charlie felt a surge of determination. While her father's words confirmed her suspicions about Evelyn, they also strengthened her resolve to ensure that the Hayes legacy would be defined by integrity, not manipulation. Sometimes, life's biggest transformations come from the most unexpected places. What started as a forced union for Charlie and Luke, it became a journey of love, redemption, and the courage to rewrite their legacy. But what would you have done in their shoes? Could you have found the strength to rise above betrayal, secrets, and pain? We want to hear your thoughts. How did this story resonate with you? Drop your comments below and share what inspired you most. And if you think this was a wild ride, trust me, the next story will leave you breathless. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next chapter of Unforgettable Stories is just around the corner. Let's keep building this community of hope and inspiration, one story at a time.